So Audrey, what inspired you to become a costume designer?
Yes, right. Well, actually, it's more Shakespeare who inspired me, actually. In 1950, I went to see the film of Hamlet, and I was completely bowled over. Everybody thinks it was Laurence Olivier was my hero, but it wasn't, it was Shakespeare. I was surprised that I understood it beautifully, and I was blown away by it. Because about a year before that, a teacher tried to take us through Midsummer Night's Dream, and I, who was very shy, went up to her and said, "Why are you trying to teach us this? We don't know this language." And then I went to see Hamlet, and I was absolutely taken by it. I think also the costumes in it actually sort of hit something in me, because I already sewed anyway. So I went home and I said, "I want to work in the theatre." I didn't know how, what I would do. I had no idea at all, but that was my ambition from then on. I was 15. And then, that year, of course, we left school. I couldn't go to university. My parents couldn't afford it. I wanted to go to art school, but my parents couldn't afford it. So we were sent to a job centre in London to have interviews about where they tried to place us in jobs. And she said to me, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to work in a theatre." So she said, "Well, that's rather difficult. Wouldn't you like to do this or that?" And I said, "No, I want to work in the theatre." And she got a bit fed up with me. Eventually, she had an idea, and she rang up several theatrical costumiers in London. There were several then. But strangely enough, all the cutters were out at lunch. But eventually, she got through to Nathan's, which was very well-known costumiers. And they said, "Okay, send her around." So I went and I got a job. And I got basics there. I was just a junior, picking up the pins and things, but I was given little jobs to do. But my real ambition at that time was to either go to the Stratford or to the Old Vic. So I decided that one day I would go past. I knew where the Old Vic workrooms were, which was off Drury Lane in I can't remember the name of the place now, Betterton Street. And I knew the house. It was his old house, actually, Betterton's own house from that time. And so I knocked on the door, and the directress came, and she said, "Yes, what do you want?" I said, "I want to work here." So she'd come in, and she took down my particulars, and she said, first of all, she said, "Have you had any No, sorry, that was before Nathan's, I went. And she said, "Have you any experience?" So I said, "No." She said, "To work here, you have to have at least 2 years' experience of costume." Of course, it was before that. So then I got the job in Nathan's. And I stuck it 2 years to the day. And I went back, knocked on the door, and I said, she didn't remember me. And I said, "I came here 2 years ago and you told me I had to have 2 years' experience. I have had it." So she'd come in, and I went in. She took my particulars, and then she said, "We'll let you know." And I thought, that's it, finished. Strangely enough, a few weeks later, I got a letter from her saying, "I'd like you to come and be my assistant."
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was so happy. And that was at the season they were doing the folio, the whole folio, and there was a crowd of very important stars and actors. I'd already started going, actually, to the Old Vic. We went to every production as it came on, because it reopened round about that time. I can't remember, I think it was in 1950, and we went to the very first performance, not the first night, but the very first play which it opened with, which was Twelfth Night, which was appropriate to the Old Vic, as you probably know. And so I was delighted. There again, I made the tea and the coffee, and I did all the odd jobs, and I did the shopping. I had to go out and match the materials. The designer would give me an idea of what he wanted, and then I'd go around the shops and try to find it, taking samples back to him. So I worked very directly with the designer, and we had some wonderful ones in those days. And so I went on with that. And another thing I used to do, I think subconsciously, of course, there was always a lot of night working towards the first night. So what I could go home I didn't have to stay. But what I did was I'd go around the workrooms and say, does anybody want any help? And they would give me odd jobs to do. And one of them was John Neville's, a collar for John Neville. He was going to wear, I think it was either Othello or Richard II. I think it must have been Richard II. And it was given to me one night late, and the cutter said to me, put that piece of braid around that edge of that collar. So I sat down and did it. She didn't say anything, she said thank you. And a little while later she said to me, I'm going to Stratford as a cutter. Would you like to come with me? I said, more than anything in the world, thank you so much. So I didn't think any more about it. When I got there, I hadn't actually had any experience of making costumes on my own after the cutter had cut them. And she gave me Dorothy Peggy Ashcroft's dress, one of her dresses for the first production. I can't remember which one it was now. As You Like It. And a long time afterwards, I said to her, "Why did you do that?" Because the girls who were working here didn't like it. They actually, one of them actually sent me to Coventry. She didn't like it at all that I'd been given, a newcomer had been given such a thing. So she said, "Don't you remember that collar you did for John Neville?" I said, "What are you talking about? Don't you remember?" I said, "Well, I do now you're talking about it, so what?" She said, "What you don't know is everybody in the workroom had tried to do it, in the workroom had tried to do it that day, and they couldn't. You sat down and did it. That's why I bought you." So then I went on and I worked there for 3.5 years.
At Stratford?
Yeah, only for 3.5 years, but it was a wonderful time because in a way it was sad because the old regime was going and Peter Hall was coming to change it all. So Glenn Byamshaw, who'd been working there for many, many years, and his team of costume designers, his wife was a costume designer, Percy they called her, and her friend, they had been working there for years and years and years, and it was a bit sad. So I worked on the last of Glenn Byamshaw's productions and the first of Peter Hall's,
Right.
which was a great change. Okay.
Audrey, when you were at Stratford, was there any particular production that you remember that was special?
Yes. After Peter Hall came, he did some wonderful productions, and to all of us, one of the very best was Twelfth Night. Dorothy Tootin played Viola. Geraldine McEwen played Olivia, and Paul Rogers played Sir Toby, and it was full of absolutely wonderful actors. But for us in the wardrobe, well, for me anyway, the greatest thing was he had found a designer in Italy, the Scala Milan, who he adored. Her name was Lila de Nobili. And she was a weird creature. She was very shy looking, and she was always unkempt. She would have one sock on of one colour, one sock on of another colour, and we thought, well, what's this going to do? What's this going to do? But she was a revelation. She did both the sets and costumes because she said they should go together. And also, she said, one of her precepts was, costume should never be fancy dress. You have to make sure the actors look as if they've been wearing them as the characters forever, for years. It's their costume and they must look as if they live in them. So this excited me very much. And she would bring bits of tatty material from Paris, from the the flea markets in Paris, and we'd incorporate them into the costumes, and under her guide, of course. It was something we'd never done before, and she also that particular design there is what her design for Olivia's costume. And one of the most exciting things I know, I made one of the costumes for Olivia, for her, and we were in the fitting room, and I'd just done the first fitting, And then Geraldine said, "But Leela, I'm wearing 2 dresses, one's black and one's yellow, but they look the same on the design, and same hat, everything's the same. Why?" So she said, "Well, it's very simple." She said, "You're mourning for your brother in black, and then suddenly you fall in love and you become changed into something bright and wonderful." And Geraldine, absolutely, she said, "That is the way I'm going to play it." You know, that was it. I was thrilled to bits. I mean, it was something I'd never heard of in the theatre before.
Yeah.
She was just such a delightful character. She once stopped some draymen who were bringing beer to the Dirty Duck, and they had very beer-stained, coarse aprons on. And she said, she looked at them for a minute, she said, "I want one of your aprons." She liked anything that was used, had stains on it. I remember another designer friend of ours who was also working there that year. He loved her too. He went in a greengrocer's he went to. At the back there was a very old green velvet curtain which was all potato stains on it and filthy. And he said to the greengrocer, "Can I buy that from you, please?" He said, "What on earth do you want that for?" And he said, "I want to give it to my designer friend to Stratford." We used that too.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful.
And was that the time when Richard Burton was acting there? And
No, Richard Burton acted there before I went there. Richard Burton was at the Old Vic when I was there. He played Hamlet, and John Neville and he alternated the roles in Othello. One night they changed over roles, which was quite exciting. But
Albert Finney.
I wasn't terribly interested in him anyway, not particularly. Although he was a very nice person.
so who were the main actors you were working with?
Sorry?
Who were the main actors?
Oh, that year, oh gosh, it's difficult to say. Charles Lawton,
Vanessa Redgrave.
Geraldine, Dorothy Tootin, I suppose Edith Evans.
Albert Finney.
They changed a lot. They didn't have, although he had a basic younger company, the stars changed a lot. There was Paul Robeson. I can't really remember any of the others.
Albert Finney.
Who?
Albert Finney.
Oh, Albert Finney, yes. Albert
Vanessa
Finney.
Redgrave.
That's Albert
Vanessa Redgrave.
Finney. I'm Laurence Olivier for Coriolanus. Not sure if it was the same year, but it was his years. So yes, there were a lot of great ones. I think it was in 1957, the production, again by Peter Hall, of Cymbeline, which is not a very easy play to do and isn't very much appreciated when it is done. But that particular production was brilliant. Peggy Ashcroft was Imogen, and she was absolutely wonderful. I think it was, I can't remember who it was, Richard Johnson, I think, was in it too. Again, it was designed by Leela de Nobili, which was an asset, of course. The interesting thing about that is it sticks in my memory as one of the best productions and best acted productions I ever saw. And people think that's very strange, being Cymbeline. But later on, some years ago, I picked up a book of Kenneth Tynan's criticisms. And you know, he was a very, very difficult critic to please. And I noticed he had a piece on that Cymbeline. And he said it was one of the best productions he'd ever seen. And he commented on the fact that it wasn't usually appreciated, but he said it was nearly perfect. This was 24 Bitterton Street, where the Old Vic wardrobe was working then when I first went there, but later on it moved to what became the National Theatre. Strangely enough, some friends of mine took it over, who were also costume makers, a couple, and one of them actually did this drawing and sent it out, this painting, and sent it out as a Christmas card to us all, and I treasure it. When I worked there, it was very creepy because it hadn't really been restored at all. And one night, if you want me to go on, one night I was the last to leave, and I had to go up to the very top here to make sure everything was shut off and all the electric plugs were out. And as I went from one room to another, the last but one room to the last one, I heard eerie music, and I was rooted to the spot. I thought, they've said this place is haunted, and now I know it is. And then suddenly I came to myself, and I realised that in those days you used to plug the radio into the light bulb up there, if you remember. You probably don't remember. But when I'd switch the light on, I'd also switch the radio on. But it just happened to be weird music.